Hi, I'm Arlen Geyer. Today I want to demonstrate some of the advanced adjustment tools in Adobe Lightroom. And I'll use this photograph of a barn to demonstrate these. So you always start off with basic adjustments. And the basic adjustments are typically the ones in the basic adjustment panel here. And typically you'll start with exposure, and then maybe look at this section down here of highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, and contrast, and ultimately vibrance and saturation, and of course white balance. So these are all the ones that you'll start off with, but there's another basic adjustment that is not in these in this section, and it's actually something that was introduced um, in Lightroom 5, a really handy one, which is down here under lens corrections. So I'm going to open that up, and actually, the first thing I want to do down here is Lightroom keeps a database of the distortions that are introduced in various lenses, and has a correction chart for those. So if your metadata includes an identification of what lens you used and what focal length you used it with, then if you enable profile corrections right here in the basic panel here, then Lightroom will correct that distortion that was introduced in your lens. All lenses have some level of distortion, and some more than others. And so if your lens happens to be in Lightroom's database, it will correct it for you, which is a handy little feature. But the one that I really wanted to show you here is down below that, this upright business. And any kind of any photograph with of a building or any kind of architectural thing where there should be straight lines. Typically, if you're shooting either up or down at a building or anything else with straight lines or should have straight lines, those lines will converge. And right now, you see this line is slightly tilting to the right. This one's tilting to the left. So Lightroom can correct that. And so if we click the vertical thing here, it makes those lines be vertical. Now you can also try these various other possibilities here. Off, of course, we go back to what it was, and we can try this level, see what that one does, and then compare that with vertical. It's a very subtle difference. Compare that with full. Don't see any difference there. Compare that with auto. That looks more like what level was. Yeah, they're pretty similar. And so you just poke around on those different ones and see which one looks best. In this case, I kind of like what vertical looks like, although the differences were very small. So that's the first adjustment I'm going to make on this. And now I can close that again. I don't need that anymore. And now I'm going to go back and do these basic adjustments in here. So I'll start off with exposure. And in this case, I want to reduce the exposure some because the roof is very bright, and the overall image is just a little brighter than it needs to be. So I'm going to knock down the exposure a little bit. And then I'd like to get some detail in the roof there, and I'm going to try to get that with the highlights. So I'm going to drop down the highlights some, and that's nice. And then when I do that, actually, I can bring the exposure back up a little bit because I brought down the highlights. And I'd also like to have a little bit more detail on the shadowed part of the barn, so I'm going to bring up the shadows. But the problem when I do that, let's see here. That also brings up it brings up the trees, and I really don't want to wash out the trees, so I'm going to keep that down. Actually, I'm not going to do that so much with that. Maybe we're going to bring it up just a little bit, and let's try bringing up the contrast a little bit. See if that helps. That makes this darker, which I really don't want, but I'm going to live with that because I like the separation it brought in here. I'll take care of this later. So when I've done all that, it has kind of given me some intense green in the grass down here. So I'm pretty much finished with all of my basic adjustments. So the next thing I want to do, actually, I want to take a look if I can fine tune this the contrast more with the tone curve. And so with the tone curve, I can come down here and down at the bottom here where it says linear right now, I can open that up and try see what it looks like with medium contrast. And that darkened this even more. It doesn't really help anything else, so don't really like that. And strong contrast, I assume, is going to be even worse, yeah. So that didn't really help anything, so I'm going to take it back to linear. Now, in here, you can do manual when it's set on linear. You can do manual adjustments to different areas by sliding these sliders. I can raise the highlights. You can see on this curve here what that's doing. I can also grab on the curve and move that up or down. And I can also change what the border is between highlights, lights, darks, and shadows by sliding these little sliders right here. In this particular image, I don't really see that I need to do that. So actually, I'm going to come back in history and go back to before I did any of those things. So I'm going to go back to where I adjusted the contrast there. And so before I did point curve corrections, because I really don't feel like that was buying me any advantage. So I'm going to close the tone curve for the moment and come back in here. And now I still have this issue that my grass is a little bit more saturated than I want. So I'm going to come into the HSL, which stands for Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. And I'm going to go to Saturation and try bringing down the saturation of the green a little bit. I can bring it down a lot just to see what it does, and then bring it back up again. And the problem is I really kind of like the saturation in the trees back here. So I'm thinking that maybe there's more yellow in this grass than there is in these. So how about if I try bringing down the yellow? I'm going to bring it down a lot first to see what it does. And that does seem to actually bring down the part that I don't like, but I don't need to do it that much. So just a small drop in the yellow saturation. Sometimes it's surprising what colors are in what areas. So in that case, although it's green, the yellow in the green was what produced an effective adjustment for me. The next thing I want to do is do something with the sky. The sky is rather pale and boring right now, and I know that I see there's detail in there, and it could be much more interesting. And I'm going to use the graduated filter, which is this little rectangular thing up here. And it starts off neutral, it's not doing anything. And I'm going to drag from the top just down to here, but I want it to be straight across. I don't want it to be crooked. And in order to help me with that, I'm going to press the Shift key, which will force it to be straight across. And I'm going to bring it right down to the tops of the mountains here. And now right now, I've got a graduated filter on there, but it's not doing anything. So I need to adjust something on here to make it do something. And I'm going to drop the exposure on that. And I like the idea, but unfortunately, it's getting too light too soon. So what it does is, the top of this, the place where I started, is the full value of whatever adjustment I've made, and then it tapers off to nothing at the other end. And I really don't like the way that worked because it got too light down here. So I realized I can make it go down a lot further and go right over the mountains and probably make an effective use of that. So I'm going to come back here to before I did the graduated filter in history. And I still have the graduated filter there. So this time I'm going to come down and hold the Shift key. I'm going to come all the way down to the top of the barn. And drop the exposure. And I like that a whole lot better. Now I've got other things I can do on here. I can increase the contrast on that. I kind of like that. And I do want to be careful not to oversaturate the sky. I think it's okay right now, but it's a little bit borderline, but it's still okay. So I think I'm just going to leave that like that. So click on the graduated filter again to turn it off. And now I notice that there are some dust spots. Let me zoom in and show you here. These spots right here are where there was dust on the sensor of my camera. And so I want to get rid of that. Now there's a really handy tool for finding all of the dust spots in Lightroom. If we go back to the tone curve, this is going to be really interesting to look at. And we have Dust Catcher 1 and Dust Catcher 2. So let's take a look at Dust Catcher 1. And what that does is, you can see on the curve, it just makes this zigzag pattern. So we have really extreme values on here. Now we're not going to leave it like this, but we're going to use this as a tool for finding the dust. You see how it really jumps out here. And I'm actually going to I'm going to take a look at the other one as well and see whether it brings out any more than this one does. So I'm going to take a look at Dust Catcher 2. And I think, yeah, they're about toss up between them, between what I can see. I think actually I can see more with Dust Catcher 1. So now I'm going to zoom in on this area just by clicking here. And I can drag over here like that. And I am going to use the spot removal tool. And I can adjust the size of this either manually with this adjustment right over here, or I can use the bracket keys. The left bracket will make it go smaller, the right bracket will make it go bigger. And I want something that's just a little bit bigger than the spots are. Maybe just a little bit bigger than that, about like that maybe. And the two circles, the outer circle is the feathered area. So feathering is where it tapers off, so you don't have an abrupt change from where it has done the repair and to where it's not. And you have two choices with the spot removal tool. You can clone or you can heal. The difference is cloning will do a literal pasting of pixels from one location to another, whereas healing is more of a smart adjustment where it takes into consideration what's in the area around it. And in this particular situation, healing will be more appropriate because I want to sort of blend with the area. So if I simply click here, Lightroom will take a guess what's a good spot to pull up from. So it's taking the pixels from this area and placing them down there to repair that. And so I'm just going to do the same thing here. And it's not behaving correctly. I think I might have moved the let's just back up to before I did that and try again. So I'm going to click. I'm going to go back to healing because I really think healing is what I want. And I'm going to click there. Okay, so I must have moved it before because it did a different kind of thing. What I want to do now is just adjust this so that I maintain that line so it doesn't look weird there, and click there. And if you don't like the spot that it's picking up from, you can move that. There's one over here. I'm going to press the space bar and drag over. And let's just do a few of these as well. And you can see that I don't have to really zoom in and get exactly the spot. But if it's giving you a bad match, then you want to do that. I also want to get rid of this. I think this is a contrail from a jet, and I'm going to get rid of it. Now, for this one, I'm going to drag all the way up like that, and Lightroom will take a guess that that's going to be a good spot. And I agree. Notice that the flow goes really nicely across there. So this is one where notice that it has the dot there because this is not a simple click that it did on this one. And this was the problem I had with the other one was I must have moved my mouse in the process. So that is a different kind of spot removal. And if I want to go back and adjust that one, I can do that by clicking on that dot. And now this one is active again, and I can actually come in here and move this if I want. But now I'm just going to go back and click on these. And that one. And you notice that I am not telling it where to do the pickup from. It's deciding that all on its own. I can tell it where to do the pickup if I, like for example here, it picked up where that line is going right through it. You can see that line going through there. So I can just grab onto that and move it over here so that it's picking up from someplace else. And that looks like it's about it. So let's turn off the spot removal tool, click out, and turn off the dust catcher. Go back to linear. And nice and clean. I do see one more over here. So let's go back to this and get rid of that one. Oh, that must be on my monitor. Okay, so zoom back out again. I can also use the spot removal tool to get rid of some of these posts if I want to. So I could just click on there, and I can do this. But if I do that, I want to make sure that these wires line up. Wouldn't want to have discontinuous wires now. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I could do that as well. I can get rid of all those posts if I want to, but I'm not going to worry about that. The next thing I want to do, as I mentioned before, that I think that this shadowed side of the barn is a little bit too dark. So I'm going to make it lighter with the adjustment brush. The adjustment brush is the one all the way on the right here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paint in the area that I want to adjust, and then after I've painted in that area, I'm going to adjust it. So I start painting here, but I can't see where I've painted. But I can make it so I can by pressing the letter O. The letter O is for overlay. And with the adjustment brush, I've got a few options here. I'll talk about auto mask in a moment. But first of all, there's the size, of course. And I can change the size there, or I can change it with the bracket keys. And there's also feathering. I can adjust how much of a blend, how big an area it blends. I can also adjust the flow. I can make it so that some of it is going to do less adjustment than other parts. If I want to do a gradual drop off, I can drop the flow down some. And now auto mask, what that will do is it will look at the color or the density of where I'm painting and try to avoid anything that's different from that. So as I come up here, you see it's attempting to just stay in the area that's like what the dominant color of the area that I'm working in. So I'll come over here, and it attempts to stay in there, right up there. Maybe we're going to come down here. Get that. But notice that it went out a little bit over here, so I can go to erase and erase that area out there. And let's erase this area here too. There we go. So that's the area that I'm going to adjust. I can actually turn off auto mask right now and get these areas in here. Whoops, I'm still on erase. I'll go back to A here. And with, oops, turn off auto mask. And with that turned off, it will go anywhere where I draw. So the auto mask was avoiding some spots in there. Okay, so that's the area that I want to adjust. So now I'm going to press O to turn off the overlay and make my adjustments. And what I want to do is raise the exposure some to lighten that area up. Let's increase the contrast just a little bit. And another clever thing we can do here is I'd like it to be a little bit redder. So I can go in here to color. This is a really cool feature. And make this a little bit red. And I could make it green. I could make it magenta. But I'm going to make it red. And I can make it a really intense red. But I don't want to add a lot of color. I just want to add just a little bit of color. And I'm going to click the X to get out of that. And that's basically what I want to do on that. Do want to be careful if you're adding color that you want to add color everything. I added so little color that you're not really seeing it on the sign there. So now I can go out of that. And if I decide later that I want to adjust that, I can go back to the adjustment brush and see that dot. If I click on that dot, I'm now back in that adjustment. If I hold my cursor over the dot, it'll show the area that I'm working on. So for example, maybe I don't like how it behaved up here, so I could go back to the eraser function and erase this area up here. If I am bothered by that, etc. So I can go back out of that, and I can always come back later anytime I want. I can come back. This is the beauty of Lightroom, is that I can always come back and do that just by going back to the adjustment brush, clicking on that dot, and I'm back in that adjustment. So that's pretty much what I would want to do on this. Let's take a look at the before and after comparison. And quite a big difference. You can see the sky is radically different. We've got a little bit more contrast in the trees here, in the grass, without oversaturating the grass, and we got more detail in the shadowed area here, and nice little bit of color there. So that's basically what I'd want. Now there's one more adjustment. I'm going to go back to the loop view. There's one more adjustment up here. Actually there's two. The red eye correction. So if you're doing a picture of a person with a flash and the person has red eye, you can take care of that with that. The other one we have here is, of course, we've got cropping. And we did a kind of a cropping with the perspective adjustment, but I don't really see any need to crop anything else in here. The other one in here is this radial filter. So let's say we want to really highlight the barn and we want everything else to go a little darker. So I'm going to take this like this and grab inside there to reposition it to where I want it. Make this one come up a little further. Make this one come up a little further. Come in a little bit more. Okay, and now drop the exposure just a little bit. Like that, and a whole lot more feathering. Let's see how that looks. Okay, now let's do before and after. There we go. I like that just fine. So that's the most of the advanced adjustments, actually most of the adjustments and all in Lightroom, and there are some other ones you can play with, but those are the primary ones. So I hope that was useful to you.